Hi, welcome to AI Shorts, the show where we talk about the intersection of machine learning and product management. We focused heavily on data, EDA, and feature engineering in the past couple episodes. By now, you should have a solid understanding of the core ingredients that go into a machine learning model. Creating a new machine learning model can be an ambiguous process, and about 85% of machine learning projects fail. This is not only due to technical reasons, but I've often found that it's also due to a lack of proper structure. So today, I'll walk you through a framework that I've developed over the years from working on many machine learning problems. The framework helps me create clarity with my teams and stakeholders when working on challenging problems. I've posted a link to the framework in the video description, so download it, follow along, and try it out on your next ML problem. This is a lengthy framework, so I'll give you a high-level overview of each slide, and you can find more details in the presenter's notes section. The framework consists of 3 sections: defining success, identifying data sources, and deployment and ways of working. First, let's dive into defining success. When starting a new model, walk through this framework with your data science team. You may want to book 3 sessions with your team and go through 1 section per meeting. You'll find that you'll have deep discussions with them, which might require some time for offline information gathering. Let's talk about defining success. The first thing you should do is identify what do you want your model to do. Imagine you're explaining it to a child using as simple language as possible. I've provided an example of a team wanting to create a video popularity forecasting algorithm for YouTube. Next, write down what is your ideal outcome. If you're familiar with OKRs, this could be a business objective. However, an outcome could also be to improve the user experience of a product. Once again, use simple language. After that, you should define what success means to you. The success metric would be a key result in the OKR framework. This should be something that you can quantitatively measure, and it should be time-bound. The success metrics are not the same as your model evaluation metrics, such as precision or recall. Also, try to quantify what it means for your model to fail. Now that you have success and failure defined, let's think about what the output of your model should be. I've provided examples of what different types of model outputs could be for different types of algorithms. Also, imagine what the model output data schema might look like and try to write that down. It doesn't have to be correct at this point, but it'll help align your team members and make sure that everybody's on the same page. On the next slide, write down how frequently the model output will be generated and when and how it will be consumed. Will the model output have to be engineered? Finally, think about how it will be integrated into your product. Okay, now let's think about how would you solve your problem if you didn't use machine learning. The exercise of making a heuristic will often help you identify good signals in your ML model. That's the end of part 1. Notice that we didn't discuss any details about the data or the model. Instead, we focused entirely on what success means to us. Teams often get so excited about the technology that they don't have a clear picture on what they're trying to accomplish, or how they'll know if they succeeded. This is why you should always start with defining success. It's also important to communicate these success metrics with your stakeholders to create alignment and set expectations. Okay, let's move on to part 2 and talk about data. First, define the ML solution that suits your problem. I've provided a list of possible solutions on this slide. Second, estimate how much data you have available and if the label closely matches what you're predicting. Also, write down input features that you could access that would be a good fit for your model. You may want to copy this table to a spreadsheet if you can't fit everything on the slide. Third, create a row under the potential input features in your table and list the data sources where your input features will be coming from. At this stage, you may discover that it's too difficult to get all the input features that you want. This brings us to the 4th and final step. Try to identify the 1 to 3 most easily obtained input features. Highlight the features in your table, and this will be your starting point. Okay, you're rocking and rolling. You know what you want your model to do, you've figured out an initial model architecture, you've identified some potential input features and their data sources. Your team should now be able to start doing EDA, feature engineering, and start developing the model. Let's move on to part 3, deployment and ways of working. First, have your team identify what tools they're going to use for ETL, model language, and data and ML libraries. Think about if there are any tools you can use from AWS, GCP, or Azure that will accelerate the delivery of your initial model. Also, consider if AutoML is appropriate for your initial problem. Second, identify how your model will be served and what tools will be used for deployment. If you're doing batch serving, At what frequency will your model output be computed? Where will the predictions be delivered? Do you need low latency serving? If you're doing real-time serving, how do you plan to create and deploy your API endpoint? Are there any SLAs that you need to meet? Are you deploying in more than one region or geography? What type of workload do you expect for your initial experiment? Now let's focus on ways of working, starting with communication. Answer the following questions. What's the preferred communication channel for your team? This could be Slack, email, or something else. If you're using Slack, what's your team or project channel name? How often should the team communicate? How will you document and share new learnings? Next, let's talk about stakeholder management. First, identify who are the primary stakeholders or business sponsors. Are there any indirect stakeholders you should share your progress with? Who are your model users or consumers? Who's the stakeholder contact person for your team? How often will you report progress to your stakeholders? Finally, how will you demonstrate your work and at what frequency? Last but not least, let's take a moment and focus on execution and velocity. Try to answer these questions with your team. What will you deliver in 2 weeks? What will you deliver in a month? What would the initial experiment for your model look like? So that's it. I know this is an exhaustive framework, but I've found that many of these slides that I shared with you today generate deep conversations with your team. So be sure to space out the sections in this deck into different sessions to allow for some offline processing. So what do you think? Do you like the framework? Will you try it out with your team? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.